Hey, welcome. I am so excited to dig into this one. What we have here is a genuine historical detective story. We're going to follow a trail of clues that are scattered across some really ancient texts. And trust me, they lead to a pretty mind-blowing conclusion about one of history's most important periods. And it really all boils down to this one question. What if a figure you think you know, someone you've heard about your whole life, was actually a composite? Two separate, real people whose stories got tangled up and merged over the centuries into a single legendary character. Well, that's the very mystery we're diving into today.
All right, so every good cold case needs a missing person, right? Well, meet ours. His name is Simeon, son of Clopas. And the historical record is clear. As the second bishop of Jerusalem, this guy was an absolute giant in the early church. So why have so few of us ever heard of him?
I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you just how incredibly important he was. He takes over as bishop right after James the Just, that's Jesus' brother. He successfully leads his community through the absolute chaos of Jerusalem's destruction in 70 CE. I mean, the most traumatic event of that whole era. And he's still in charge for decades after that, right when Rabbinic Judaism is being formed at Yavne. Oh, and get this. On top of all that, he was also Jesus' first cousin. Think about this. He was in charge for about 45 years. Just let that sink in for a second. For nearly half a century, he led the mother church in Jerusalem during the exact time frame when the Gospels were being written and passed around. And yet, there's not one single letter, not one text, not a single word attributed to him in the Christian canon. How is that even possible? So, where did this giant of history go? Well, the source material we're looking at has a fascinating theory. It argues he never really left. He was just hidden, absorbed into an even more famous name. And to figure this out, we've got to put on our detective hats and follow the clues. Let's get into it. Okay, clue number 1. It all starts with a very common name, Simon. We're going to look at this really puzzling pattern in the Gospel of Luke that, honestly, once you see it, you just can't unsee it. So check this out. Luke has this really strict rule he seems to follow. After Jesus officially names Simon Peter way back in chapter 6, Luke uses the name Peter every single time, consistently. But look at that very last line. In the final chapter, right after a story involving a man named Cleopas, the text suddenly says the Lord appeared to Simon. Why break the pattern right at the very end? Well, the argument is that this isn't Simon Peter. It's a different Simon, the son of the man who was just mentioned, Cleopas. And this leads to another really interesting piece of the puzzle, the Cephas that the Apostle Paul talks about in his letters. Well, he doesn't sound a whole lot like the Peter we know from the Gospels. Paul's Cephas is a pillar of the Jerusalem church, a big deal, and really committed to Jewish law. The Gospels Peter is a fisherman from Galilee who has this major vision telling him it's okay to break dietary laws and eat with Gentiles. As you can see, these two guys have very, very different resumes. And you know what? This wasn't some fringe idea cooked up recently. Look at this list. Several early Christian writers, starting as early as the 2nd century, made the exact same point. They straight up named Peter and Cephas as two different people. It seems to have been a known tradition that just somehow got lost to history. Now for our second clue. This one comes from a really fascinating collection of early Christian adventure stories called the Pseudo-Clementines. And you can think of this clue as finding a major historical figure at a conference, but he's wearing the completely wrong name tag. So the hero of these stories is named Peter, but his entire profile is, well, it's just wrong. He's based in Syria, not Galilee or Rome. He's an author who sends his writing back to James in Jerusalem to get it approved. He's a fierce defender of Jewish law who basically sees Paul as his main rival. And this all happens after 70 CE, when the Peter we know from the New Testament was almost certainly already gone. It just doesn't add up. But that same wrong profile, it turns out to be a perfect point-for-point match for our missing bishop, Simeon, son of Clopas. He's the one who led the community that fled to Syria. He led the Torah-observant group known as the Nazarenes. As James's successor, he would have operated under that same authority structure, and, of course, he was active for decades after 70 CE. The profile fits him like a glove. The argument is that it's actually Simeon's story, it's just being told under Peter's more famous name. Okay, this next clue, this is where the story takes a truly wild turn. To find our missing bishop, we have to look in one of the last places on Earth you would ever expect,
deep inside the central prayer of Rabbinic Judaism.
So, according to the source, the trail is hidden in a kind of linguistic breadcrumb trail. It's about how Simeon's family name, CLOPAS, was remembered and passed down in rabbinic texts. See, the KLPS sound of CLOPAS was preserved as the Hebrew name HaKelphis, and over time, that was likely misheard or slightly corrupted into the name we find in the Talmud, Hapikulai. It's a subtle but clear path. Now here's where it all connects. The Talmud, the foundational text of Rabbinic Judaism, credits this specific guy, Shimon Hipakuli, with a absolutely monumental job. He is said to have arranged the Amidah, the central standing prayer of Judaism, during that great reorganization period at Yavne. This is a huge deal, and this leads us to the most jaw-dropping clue of all. The source points to this incredible theory. The 15th blessing in this prayer thanks God, who causes the horn of Yeshua to flourish. Now, the word Yeshua in Hebrew can absolutely mean salvation, but it's also the Hebrew name for Jesus. And the grammar, which is a little clunky for the word salvation, is a perfect grammatical fit for a person's name. So the big question is, was Simeon embedding a secret, double meaning into the very heart of Jewish prayer?
Wow. Okay, so we followed all the clues. The name game in Luke, the case of the wrong name tag, the incredible hidden prayer. Now let's see how the source puts it all together to finally crack the case.
The source proposes what it calls a mechanism of erasure, and this is key. It wasn't some dark conspiracy. It was a gradual, probably unintentional merger. Think about it. You've got two incredibly important leaders, both named Simon. In the Semitic languages of the day, both were given a rock nickname, Peter in Greek and Cephas in Aramaic. Over time, it just became way too easy for the stories of the less famous Simon, the Bishop of Jerusalem, to get attached to the legend of the much more famous Simon, the Apostle from Galilee. And so, this is the central thesis of it all. Simeon, son of Clopas, wasn't deliberately scrubbed from the history books. He was absorbed. His long, influential career, his writings, maybe even his incredible role in shaping Jewish liturgy, it was all preserved, but under someone else's name. The case of the missing bishop is solved. He was hiding in plain sight the entire time.
And that, of course, leaves us with one last, really provocative thought. If a figure this important, this foundational, could be so thoroughly absorbed into another, well, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories, what other figures, and what other hidden histories are still out there, just waiting for the right clues to be pieced together?